Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's very special webinar. Today we have a very special guest, D-Fab, David Fabian, and he is going to be talking about mastering broadcast and live audio for worship services. But before we get into that, I am going to launch a poll right quick, and while I'm giving you the housekeeping details, I would love for you to chime in on this poll. So we want to know, where are you all coming from? Are you sound engineers? Do you run front of house, monitors? Do you run audio for broadcasts or streams? Or none of those, but you're very interested in learning more? So get those votes in, and while you're voting, I'll give you the quick housekeeping bits for this webinar. First of all, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. It usually takes us about a week or so to get it edited, but once it is edited, it will be available for on-demand viewing at shure.com/webinars. Once again, that website is shure.com/webinars. It's a great place to see all of our past archived webinars and also to see any upcoming sessions we have. So please visit that website and you can peruse all of our great webinar content. I will also send an email out to everyone that registered for this session with that recording once it's available. Second of all, as we go through the session today, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those in the Q&A section. It should be a little question mark in a speech bubble. Click on that. Type in any questions that pop into your head, but be patient because we will be holding on questions until the end of the session. And so with that housekeeping done, it looks like we're over 80% on this poll, so I'm going to close it and show the results here. And it looks like we have a nice mix of front of house and broadcast streamers, just a smattering of monitor engineers, and then also a smattering of people that aren't currently any of these roles, but they are interested in learning. And I think you're all going to take a lot out of this conversation. I know I certainly am going to. And so let me get back to the presentation now. Give me just a second. All right. So, as I said, we have a very special guest today, David Fabian, better known as D-Fab, who is a renowned audio engineer and the founder of D-Fab Productions, is going to give us all sorts of great insights. And our friend here and Shure colleague, Michael Moore, is going to be guiding the discussion, who is in market development and industry relations here at Shure. So, Michael, why don't you kick it off and tell us a little bit about what we're going to be going through today?
Absolutely. As always, Cheryl, thank you so much for getting all this put together for us. Today, excited to talk to D-Fab, share some information, and also, a part of the wonderful journey of audio. As we all know, if we're here, we usually have a passion for it. Is the awesomeness of all of these webinars are touching folks globally and really reaching out to folks that are outside of the U.S. And I think it's part of today's discussion. I think is an awesome journey to talk a little bit about D-Fab, David Fabian, here with me today, and his journey of how he got started in audio, because I know I started out at a young age at 13 myself, and then just talk about those influences of the passion for production, what really got him into doing this work. And then, of course, how he got into the U.S., how he got established, some of the things along the way. We want to make sure that, for folks that may be newer to the industry, that may not be established, so hopefully some helpful tips and hints and things to keep feeding your passion for the industry and some good knowledge for it. And then, of course, get to the meat and potatoes, broadcast audio for church services, talk about some choir miking, which is always a topic that nobody seems to have a silver bullet for. And just some other things that are involved around that when you deal with multiple engineers in certain scenarios, and how we mic things up, and how we all work together better to give, whether it's your church or whether it's a commercial facility. How do we help you get to a better place with your experience, and also have a higher level of quality of show as well. So with that, would love to just kind of kick this off with a quick intro, bring D-Fab into
before
the
we do that, we have one more poll.
Oh,
sorry about that. Yes, we have one more poll. So we know a little bit about where you're coming from, but now we want to know a little bit about what congregation you might be working with. So we've got this poll right here. So if you are working in front of in a house of worship as a sound engineer, we want to know what size congregation are you working with? Is it 250 or smaller, or 750 or smaller, 1250 or smaller, or larger than that? So let us know generally kind of what size congregation you're working with, just so we can get to better know who we're talking to today. And the votes are starting to come in slowly but surely. And I'm really excited to hear D-Fab about all of the sizes of different venues and congregations that you've worked in. I'm sure that they have spanned and ran the gamut. And the votes are still rolling in. All right. Just give it a few more moments here. Okay. I think we've got about as many as we need. So I'm going to close this poll and show the results. So it looks like we've got a good kind of mix here. Mostly smaller congregations, but a nice mix of some of those mid-size and even a few from those extra large congregations. So a wide, diverse group of attendees here, and we're so happy to hear you. And so with that, let's kick it back into the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheryl. So this that's a good mix of folks there. I think that shows a nice representation of probably smaller format as well as the larger formats as well. So looks like we've got an awesome group of folks to talk with today. And by the way, again, as Cheryl mentioned, if you've got a comment or a question or something that you would like a topic for us to expound upon, by all means, put it in the Q&A. We want to make sure this stays interactive and something that you really gain something from this is really the goal of this webinar. And with that, D-Fab, so let's kick it off. You started your life as a small infant child out in Peru.
That's right. Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, the Shure team, for having me here and be part of this webinar. I'm excited and I'm honored to be part of it. And I hope everybody gets something that can relate with me in my experience and my history. So, yes, I'm from Peru, originally born and raised in Peru. I graduated in '98 from high school, and in 2000, my family and we moved to the States. My parents grew up in church, so I grew up in church. Well, my parents were in music. My dad later became a pastor and worked for the church as a missionary. We actually lived in Costa Rica for 2 years in '85 and '86. Then we went back to Peru. My first instrument, it was piano. So I will sit down in front of the stereo, play a cassette or CD, and just learn by ear. So that's how I started into music, and then later be part of the worship team, help church, going to youth camps, always around music. And I always wanted to go to like a music school. But in 2000, when I moved to the States, we decided to come here to go to college, get a better education. Mm-hmm. And we landed here in Georgia. My parents had close friends, so that's why we moved here to Georgia. I enrolled to college for computer networking, believe it or not. And later, because of the youth group, the church that we were, we found North Point. They took us to one of the trips to see North Point, and that's how I saw production in a big magnitude. The quality, the level, the music, everything was just amazing. I was blown away, and that's how I opened my eyes to production world, and I was in love with it.
Now, along the way, obviously, at least I started out at a really young age at a very, very small church myself in Indiana. That was one of those, I would have checked that box of somewhere about a 500 member congregation or less. So it was a pretty small church with very limited budget, very limited PA as well. So as you were growing, as a musician and then taking to the technology, Was that something that really helped you along the way, where you enjoyed the musicianship side, but really the technology? Like, at what point did you really kind of figure out that you really like that technology more, or just as much as your as the musicianship side?
Yeah, so playing music, I was always fascinated with technology. Um, I would like to figure out how things work, how things put together. And yes, I guess I spent a lot of years on the stage playing music, but I was always in relation with communication with, what's going on behind the scenes. I was curious about it, learning about it, and of course, to to uh, perform better, knowing what's going on behind the technical aspect.
Okay. And then when you got here to the States into Georgia, uh, and at North Point, was that something where you just kind of started to volunteer on that team as hey, I'd like to learn more, or you had a certain skill set that when you offered up to volunteer with them, was there a certain level of knowledge that you were confident in that you felt you had, or were you still kind of on your way up learning, especially in a large church of that size? Obviously, it's a fairly large large facility.
Yeah. Yes, I would say that that's where my passion for production started, and of course, learning as much as I can, understanding how teams work, how system works. I will also be researching on, like, per se, Hillsong Church. They used to have a Hillsong College, and learning about production. I would just Google, where can I learn production? And luckily, when I searched North Point, they had volunteering openings. So I will just sign up. And that's how I started volunteering for North Point. That time it was 722 Ministries, Louis Iglio. They were hosting their services at North Point, and they have multiple teams. So I just put my name on it. It wasn't straight into the audio world. I started doing keynotes, running keynotes. That was way before Proper Center. In the video control room, they will have
Yeah.
multiple computers that now Proper Center does in all in
Yep.
one computer. So the goal was just to start somewhere. At that time in my life, I didn't wasn't sure what I wanted to do, whether it was audio or video or anything else. I just wanted to get my foot on the door and learn as much as I could. But being part of a team, trying other things and seeing how everything works, that helped me to discover what I was attracted to more.
Yeah. Was there any on that way up through your experiences, uh, and I'm totally going to put you on the spot here. Was there any mentor, any advice, or anything that really kind of sticks out as along the way of that was really helpful information? For the folks out there that are growing and learning in their experience, that obviously may not be at the level that you're at today, but things along the way that really helped you, feed the passion, or any tips or advice in that younger age as you were nurturing the that passion to get into production?
I will just go to front house, talk to the engineers, whether it was a concert or church, and try to, just ask questions. I didn't specifically have a mentor at that young age, since I was trying to discover and explore all the aspects of productions. But anything that I can find, whether it was, a documentary or video, uh, just dive in and do a lot of research. Uh, and of course, there were engineers that they will be very open to share what they were doing, and guide me in the right direction. That way I can, decide what I wanted to do in production world.
Okay. Uh, and is there anything, looking back, that you would have changed, or would have maybe prioritized, or invested more time in, just looking back at that experience that you had, that would have helped you maybe a little bit more or got you to that next level a little quicker?
Uh, years later, yes, I look back and I will wish that we had the resources that we have now. Technology was very limited back then, especially what you can find online. But we now have that access and to a lot of information and resources.
Mhm. It
Yes,
is. Yeah, we've got with Shure Audio Institute and all of the, especially over the last couple of years, it's just amazing the amount of information that you can get online, which is great. Yeah, I
yes,
love, and just the opportunity to do things like this is awesome, to share that experience, to feed the passion, give some knowledge, and keep people moving, in the right direction and motivated about it. So,
yes. And for the poll that we saw earlier, we see a handful of people that they are interesting, into the production world. So, yes, there are different places like this that I will definitely dive in, get as much information, contact people, get a mentor. You have a lot to that you can reach now.
yeah. Now, you worked at North Point, and then from North Point, you had also worked at Victory as well. And so for where you're at today, from where you started, you are, as D-Fab Productions. This is your full time career. This is your job. Like, you are a full time mixer, which I know a lot of folks out there. Uh, may not be able to, or may just be part-time or volunteers. But that is your full-time gig right now is doing nothing but live audio, broadcast audio, is my understanding, correct?
Yes, yes. So just going back to my history, when I transferred to audio production, went to school for audio production, graduated in
Yeah.
2008, right in the recession in December. Actually, that's when I graduated. I was still working in retail. A friend of mine hit me up and was like, "Hey, I'm working for this AV company doing system integrations. Would you be interested in doing it?" So I jumped in, and that's how I started in doing AV system integrations all
Okay.
across the country. That was around 2012, and that's how D-Fab Productions started uh, serving in that category.
Okay. And I come from an integration background myself, and do volunteer uh, uh, mixing as well from time to time, myself. And I feel like there is some importance in understanding signal flow and some of that, and what has from that integration side, from really understanding what's, if you will, what's under the faders and what those are connected to. How has that helped you to be a better audio engineer, by not just understanding the console and the workflow and the layout, but truly understanding that signal flow? How have you benefited from really truly understanding, like, how the full system is assembled and put together?
Yes, that doing working in the AV world helped me understand how systems work, not only in audio but video.
Mhm.
Having understanding how signal flow, like you said, works from the source to all the destinations. In my case, I'm in broadcast world for the most part. Um, so we are sending, feed to the live stream, YouTube, websites, multiple site campuses. So I gotta make sure that everybody's getting the right feed, the right signal at the right time. So growing up into that area of the AV world, I have a better understanding of systems. So yes, not just because you're an audio engineer, uh, just focus on that, but having an understanding how everything else around you is put together, that helps you a lot to be a better engineer.
Mhm. Very cool. Uh, Kind of moving on. And by the way, is there anything else, just from, I guess, being someone that, as you work with different churches, um, and going into different cultures, things like that. What, from a standpoint of working together, because communication is so key in this industry to pull off a production, that you've got to have concise, efficient communication between all the different teams. How do you approach that as an independent engineer that may be called to come in to work with the church on a certain event, or a certain Sunday, or to do training with their team? What are some of the things when you approach these situations, that helps you kind of get into the pocket and really make it a positive experience for all the other folks there, and really help kind of build them up?
Yes. So one thing that I love that I get to do is I get to work with different churches, and it's not the same thing every weekend. I can be in one church one weekend, another church in another weekend, or different events. But what excites me is um, it's always something new. Whether it's okay, if it's the same weekend service, there is always a challenge. Um, Going back to the church or different events, walking in, you have to learn their culture, and you have to be open to perform with that. Know how they work, how the workflow is from weekend to weekend. Um, so you have to be very open-minded and learn how they work. That I think that help being open to that helps me to figure out, okay, this is how the system works here, this is how we're going to execute, and
Hmm.
get familiar with their system. um, Being ready for the unknown. Sometimes there's a change in the set list last minute, and we have to be ready for that.
Hmm.
So I love being part of that and being open and flexible for you know any culture.
Yeah, very cool. Um, is there anything else? We're kind of transition here from some of the background and some of the helpful knowledge and experience over the last many years that you've been doing this. Is there any little last in, and we'll just kind of start to jump into a little bit more of the technical side and talk a little bit more about the technology applications, and things like that. If you got anything last minute to add.
Yeah, I would like to for the people watching online right now to jump in the chat and see where they're watching from. Like me, I came from another country, Peru, here to the U.S., the land of opportunities. And language was a barrier for me, so I had to like
Okay.
learn really quick. I mean, but if I did it, anybody can do it. So I would encourage anybody, whether it's coming here or anywhere in the part of the world that where you are, like be encouraged.
Absolutely. Yeah, feel free to drop it in the chat. I know Cheryl will probably kill me, but yeah, let yeah,
That
it's
would be in the
amazing.
Q&A, actually, not the chat.
Oh, in the Q&A. Oh,
Oh,
yes. Q&A. Thank you, Cheryl. Always there to herd the cats. Um, in regards to your your events, your productions that you do now, as we transition into we'll go to a technical topic here, and just talk about choir miking. Your insight, your thoughts on it, what's worked well for you. It seems like the anytime we do, especially house of worship, anytime we do anything related to house of worship, it's always like, hey, I need to mic a choir. And it seems like you've got your basic like 3-to-1 rules, but then other times it's like, how many mics can we stick up, or do we do certain techniques to mic certain people to highlight? In all of your vast experience, just share with us kind of what your take is when you walk in and somebody says, hey, I've got, whether it's a 12-piece choir or, a 100-person choir. Kind of what are the things you ask? What are the things that you look at and analyze? And then, what would you, from an application standpoint, how do you approach those?
yes, from my experience, it's a three-way communication I'm most of the time in the broadcast seat, uh, and you have the front of house engineer, a monitor engineer, and it goes a three-way communication. Like, okay, we're gonna use this kind of mics. We're gonna mic him in this place. Uh, the number of choir members, and it's a whole circle of communication, even with the talent. Like maybe that's the opportunity for us to educate and create a culture. Like we need 120%. Give me all you got. We're gonna project, so we
Yeah.
can we can get a good capture, and it can be challenging, whether if we're in a small place and small congregation, maybe figure out, like we're gonna put the drums on that side of the stage and put the choir on this side of the stage, so to help with, stage bleeds, cymbal bleeds, but make the right choice on choir mics, choir mic techniques, like you were saying. uh, but it's a team effort, and I'm being in that spot where we are, in small places, small churches, and now that I'm more involved into the broadcast mix, luckily we have good engineers that they make the wise and right decision to acquire a mic, and going back to the basics: high pass, low pass, and just ride a fader.
Yeah. You brought up a really interesting point that sometimes there's a little bit of divide for whatever reason
Yep.
in the church market between the talent, if you will, worship teams versus like the tech team, and sometimes it almost seems like they don't really mesh and work together. What How do you approach situations like that? Because, and the reason why I bring this up is that you can have the best technology in the world, you can have the perfect your perfect system set up, every microphone, but without having that communication with the talent, so to speak,
Yep.
with the worship team. How do you approach that worship team so that you get what you need out of them and they know that you're there to serve them?
Correct. Yeah. It's a collective effort, and be very transparent, and have a communication with front of house engineer. I mean, and being open about it. If there is I'm struggling with certain things, bring it to the table and make a decision to help each other.
Mhm.
And like with the talent, we want to create a good culture and for them, to express and project what they're communicating, whether it's singing or speech. We are there to help and communicate. I think we are the bridge between what's going on the stage and production world. I think, most of the time, for a house engineer, they have to be taking care of that aspect, and we're broadcast engineer and monitor engineer. We're there to support.
Very cool. As a broadcast engineer, unfortunately, when that poll ran this at the first of the webinar, I was actually a monitor guy, so I'm not represented here on the call. But started to learn to do front of house. I really loved monitors. Uh, but when you look at front of house mixing versus broadcast mixing, what how do you approach that? How do you think about it? How do you prepare differently for those different positions? And even to throw in monitor engineering in there as well. How do you what do you switch in your mind or your workflow or your thought process when somebody says, "Hey, we really want you to do front of house on this gig, and next week it's going to be a broadcast." What do you do to kind of prepare uniquely for those positions?
Uh, when I started in audio, I mixed front house, and I did that for many years. Um, and recently, I started doing broadcasts for the last 10 years. But in my young age, when I started doing front house, I mean, you're mixing for the room, uh, you're mixing for the experience, how you connect that message with the people. Uh, you can feel the energy in the room, which is exciting. I love running front house. And then jumping into broadcast world, because I went to school for audio production, a lot of that stuff was more studio world. And I think the experience between running program house in live sound and learning that from school into studio world, I think for me it blended very well together, because now my goal in mixing for front house is to transmit the same energy, the same live feeling to the audience watching online.
Mhm.
Uh, and I, just a little story, when I started doing audio, I will come back on Sundays from church and I will sit down at after lunch and just watch live streams from different churches, like per se, like Lakewood. I would just sit down and just watch the live stream. My wife will be like, "We just got out of church, why are you watching church again?" So, but I don't know why I was so interested, but I guess I learned how uh, uh, levels and mixes and all the things, how consistency was. So I guess I got a good reference out of it, and I'm always watching, like live television, like the Grammys, just
Mhm.
learning from what people are doing out there, like kind of like that's my reference. But yeah, so my approach for front house and broadcast, when I'm mixing for broadcast, I want to transmit the same energy, the live feeling. Like I want when people they put their headphones on per se, I want them to feel like if they're in the room.
Mhm. Um, and then just to kind of split that conversation up for the folks that are, which we had a lot of front of house engineers, it looks like from the poll, and then broadcast stream as well. Uh, when you approach uh, mic technique for those positions, are there any little things, subtle differences that you look at if it's your choice? Say you're front of house and you're not worried about a broadcast stream, or there may not be a broadcast stream, versus if the show is focused on that broadcast recording for the production value for a later date. How do you, are there certain things that you do a little bit differently with miking technique, just in general speaking of a 5 or 6 piece band on stage, that you would do in one position and maybe not the other position?
Yeah, unfortunately, in broadcast world, it's very transparent, and you can hear all the details. Versus, front house, you're in the room, you're experiencing the energy. A lot of the low end bass, the drums, excites the room, and for me, like I'm very musical. I want to experience that. It's a little forgiven, in miking techniques, because everything else is so lively.
Hmm.
In broadcast mix is very transparent. So yes, my way of mixing, of course, and my focus is to hear the vocals, not only the lead singer, but everybody else,
Hmm.
and then everything else music wise to support that.
Hmm.
So mixing technique, mixing wise is a different approach. So it's very transparent to the
Hmm.
broadcast world.
Uh, and and so in general, from that broadcast standpoint, um, the use of filter sets and things like that, and certain features of the console that you're behind, are there certain things that you use more in one position versus the other? Certain types of more aggressive or less aggressive EQ, or compressors or gate settings or things like that, just as a general discussion. Do you see a large difference between those two types of settings in those two positions?
Yes, I mean you have all the tools that you can use, and um, I think the most important thing that will translate for both places is the source. Whether it's you're making an instrument, spending time to get a good capture of, like per se, a drum kit, and we talked about like singers, have the proper how to hold the microphone, so they can project better. Um, and yes, all the tools that we have to our advantage, whether it's plugins, some processing. But if we don't get the main thing, the source dial, set properly,
Hmm.
everything else is gonna just fall into place, because sometimes we can get caught up in, oh, I'm gonna just throw this plugin to fix an issue, but that's not the case for the most part.
So gain structure is kind of a really important thing when especially when you're having to share a split with multiple other
Right.
audio engineers. So
Yes.
who in your world gets to call the gain?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes in some places, some venues, Monitor World will have the master gain, and some other venues, front house, will have the master gain, and broadcast will just follow that.
Okay. Uh, is there from along that thought process as being the broadcast side of things? Um, is there any? It, you've obviously kind of really focused in on that over front of house. Was that just something that you just naturally enjoyed because of the culmination of the studio, kind of some of the studio background with some of the education and just the ability to apply that some of those techniques and some of that learned experience to that position?
Yeah.
And for folks that are live, that are looking to get into broadcast, we actually have a couple folks as well that we're trying to train up ourselves um, in broadcast. What really is something that from somebody that's a live audio engineer or a monitor person that's moving to broadcast, what would you recommend or suggest to them? Outside of that was a great, by the way, that was awesome. Like to actually listen and reference other mixes, I think is just, great to listen to what's out there because you're the audience listening. So you're listening to the finished mixed product. So you can hear the A, the B between all the different engineers out there. Um, Besides things like that, what else would you recommend to folks that are transitioning into broadcast or new to broadcast to kind of help them get ahead and continue to grow where they don't stagnate, where they're not mixing like a front of house person in a broadcast suite?
Yes, totally. Get familiar with, live events, per se, just like watching the Grammys, as they have live performances. I would say, find a good system that works for you, good workflow. I personally have templates that I developed throughout the years that works for, this church, and work with the other church that they have their own templates as well. But, they work with that because consistency is number one, to develop a good quality of product. Uh, and then second, I would say have good reference. Listen to platforms where there's you choose 2D monitors, listen to smaller, even TV monitors or headphones. I trust a lot on my headphones. Like I own this pair of headphones that I have over 10 years, and everywhere I go, I use them a lot because I know how they sound. So be familiar with your reference. Use 1, 2, 3 points of reference, whether it's headphones, studio monitors, TV speakers. You want your mix to translate well, because like right now, if you pick up a record and you listen in your sound system, your truck, your car, or in the office, and in your hi-fi audio, it's going to translate. So that should be your goal. It needs to translate well all across the platforms.
All right. So I've got to ask a personal question. Um, when you mix for broadcast, obviously mixing for front of house, there's usually a dB range that most houses of worship will say, hey, you know what, this is a do not exceed limit. We want to be within this, 80 to 90, whatever it may be, margin. When you're in broadcast and you've got live monitors in front of you, how do you determine what volume you mix at? And does that by setting a certain or preferring a certain volume, does that also help the mix to translate um, more consistently across, a small little 1-inch computer speaker to, a larger stereo system?
Yes, of course, when you're mixing from a house, you have a dB that you can target, and you can be working around that vicinity. In broadcast world, there are tools. I use a lot the Waves loud meter plugin on my master chain, so I can use that as a reference. And every place that will have, okay, you need to target this dB of level. So you use that as a reference, and I have a scope that you can see your full frequency spectrum. I like to see that so I can see, my lows, mids, and highs, and have consistency throughout my mix. So I use those tools to use as a reference. Of course, in multi-viewers, they have a view meter also, and if they don't, I ask for it because I want to know where I am, where my mix is, is hitting to the world. So definitely there are tools like that that you can use for to help your mix.
Okay, very cool. We had, and we're kind of getting, I think, close to the end here. I think we've got some, hopefully, got some things in the Q&A. But I know that we had a video clip, just a kind of an A and B type thing that I think we were gonna just look for, and then while we play that clip, if you would, before we play that, if you can kind of frame, because this was for Passion, which is a large event for folks that may be familiar or may not be familiar. But if you don't mind, just take a few minutes and just kind of frame, because it's an amazing event. It's an extremely large event. And if you would just take a few minutes to talk about that, and then just kind of talk about, queue up what we're going to listen to here for folks on the call that'll just kind of understand maybe an A/B and give them an idea, and maybe give them a reference point from a listening standpoint that'll help them in their mixing.
Yes, so I have the opportunity to be part of the Passion Conference for the last 3 years. I was one of the broadcast engineers in the team. I mean, they have multiple broadcast engineers taking care of different artists. So in this video clip that I put together, we just want to represent what we are sending to the world, to the live stream. The mix, not only the mix, but the crowds. We have people dedicated just to do crowd mics, and we just receive, the stereo stem, and we just mix it, blend it into the mix. And on the second part of that clip, you will hear just unprocessed audio. Nothing. It's just from the virtual playback. It's just raw, no processing at all. So yes, we wanted to share that with you. You can experience how I love to transmit the energy, the live feel of the audience, the energy in the room through broadcast. All right.
Very cool. So just real quick, just kind of talk through. We heard it sounded like the full mix, everything, and then it kind of cut down to where it sounded like it may have taken some of the crowd mics out and just down to maybe some of the tracks. Talk about just real quick some of that processing on that created that massively large wall of sound.
Yes. On that mix at the beginning, of course, crowds is very important. Uh, I love the live feeling. Processing wise, we're using ways to process all of these. We're working on digital consoles. Um, we're using all of those tools to process to have this mix for broadcast. And on the second part, everything is bypassed. So yes, you can hear a huge difference. There is no panning, no high pass, no low pass. It's just raw from the virtual playback. And that's what we use to actually work on our mixes to have it ready for this event.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Um, with what's been your most favorite event? We'll wrap it up here with a lightning round here. What's your favorite event that you've ever done?
Well, yeah, I mean, being part of those passion conferences, it's just like you say, it's huge event. We have many artists coming to be part of it. It's such a great experience, and the team that you get to work with, everybody is just great. They're amazing. They're great at what they do. Very experienced, and it's just very, very humbling, to be part of that. I think that probably has become, a really something that I look forward to do.
All right. And so going to the other end of the spectrum, what was maybe not the most favorite event or job, but the one where you learned the most?
The one I learned the most challenging probably was working in an outdoor event. I was working it was in a rodeo arena, um, open, which I only had that time. I only had two crowd mics, and the challenge was, to transmit the same feel for live broadcasts. But we managed to do that. It was a good challenging experience. That was out in Montana last year.
All right. So everybody, there's always the great debate. Kick mic, uh, in, out, or combo of two mics. What's your preference?
I have them both. I use both, and I think depending on what you're mixing, uh, whether it's CCM, gospel, have the tools there ready, and you can blend them and or choose
Mhm.
from and have them ready is great.
Very cool. Um, Here as we wrap up, we're not quite to the top of the hour left, but leave a few minutes here for Q&A. Is there anything else that you would love to impart to anybody here in regards to just your experience mixing in churches, or even for folks that are out there that are part-time, that may be interested in going full-time as an independent engineer, because that's obviously a big leap to be able to provide. Which, by the way, congratulations on the 20-year anniversary last week
Mhm.
as well. So we're so glad for you that made time to join us this week. But to be able to do that full time is a passion, and follow your dream. Anything that you would share with folks that may be looking to pursue audio and engineering as a full time job?
Yes, I would say be part of a community. Be surrounded by people that they are willing to pour out into your lives. Growing up in the production world, you reach out to people, and some of them there will be like wide opens and share their experiences as well. And I think that is the most value for me that I learned. Um, find a mentor, find a community that is there to support you. One of my 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 persons that always cheered me throughout my career is my wife. She I will give her my mixes and she will critique and she will be like dead honest with me. Okay, this is not great. You need to fix that. So I think having people like that they can be truly honest with you. One thing I learned in school was I was walking into this class and the professor was like, okay, you're leaving your ego at the door. You're coming here. We're going to critique your mix. And I
Mhm.
thought that was like, wow, okay, I'm going to think like that always.
Yeah.
And I would share my mixes to everybody, hey, what do you think, and give me some pointers here and there. And that's how I learn because of the feedback that I ask.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's pretty, sometimes it's not. And you just have to, and from engineers also, like they share their techniques you learn. I've gone to training seminars, workshops, and you come back and you're excited, like you try different techniques, you use what works for you,
Mhm.
and if it doesn't work for you, move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
For the new outcomer engineer peoples, I want to say like be prepared. That's the key is be prepared, learn, gain as much knowledge, get as much information as you can. There are a lot of resources out there right now that I didn't have access to when I first started. Um, be prepared, walk into a gig like that's the gig of your life. You know,
Mhm.
that's the mindset that you should have. Do your best, work with excellence. You
Mhm.
know, I'm OCD, I'm a perfectionist, and that's probably our worst enemy. But working with excellence, have good character, uh, develop a good system, and deliver a good quality product. That's probably is gonna speak more. Let your work speak for itself.
Yeah.
Um,
Great.
I will say that, yeah, to the new outcomers, new engineers that are interested in this field.
Fantastic. Thank you, D-Fab, for all your insights. Are we ready to dive into questions, gents?
Let's do it.
All right, fantastic. First of all, I just wanted to say, in regards to D-Fab's question about where people are joining us from, we have a lot of people all across the U.S., Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, Woodstock, Georgia, Ohio, Maryland, Winnetka, Illinois, Indy, but also somebody as far away from as Vietnam. So we definitely have some international attendees. So thank you so much for taking the time. All right. So first question, we got a lot of very technical specific questions. So let's dig in. D-Fab, what would you say is the best mic for a pipe organ in the pipe room?
Wow.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I haven't done a pipe organ before.
Would
I've
you
seen them in churches, but I will just throw a couple of condenser mics.
would you do a would you do like a large, probably like maybe a large diaphragm if they have the option, and maybe kind of with the high pipes, low pipes, and the different bands, maybe kind of like, would you split it with like two mics or maybe three mics or something like that to blend it if it was inside of that room, or what
Yeah.
would be your first take on it?
If it will be possible, I will do two condenser mics to do the highs and another one for the lows. I will play with them. Experiment.
Experiment. I think that's always a good answer because you never know.
Yeah.
Great. Next question. What would you say? I know you talked a lot about this, but what would you say is the main difference between a live mix versus an audio for a video streaming broadcast mix?
Depending on the source, I guess, at the room. I mean, a live mix versus what was the question?
What would you say is sort of the main difference between, mixing live in the room and what you would mix for a broadcast?
Oh, mixing live in the room, like front of house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, like I said, transmitting the energy, the feel, the live feel for broadcast, for the live stream. That's my main goal. That's where I'm focused on. I'm always writing the crowds with the music, so I can transmit the energy of the room for the audience.
Fantastic. Regarding choir miking, could you give some specifics about how you like to choir mic, as in how many, how you set them up? Just kind of, I know that's a very deep topic, but kind of maybe a general overview of how you approach it technically.
Yes, I will have probably having options is very critical, I guess. Maybe having 4 mic stands, and you can just listen to them and see which ones they sound best. And have those options is great.
Okay. So this is kind of a specific question for someone in their setup. They have a simple rig that is an audio signal that comes through a Behringer X32 and goes directly to the internet broadcast. Can you suggest any sort of processing or something that you can put in the middle to improve the sound that is heard on the internet, taking into account the budget?
Correct. If you have that set up, I will focus on play with your limiter and compressor. Have that to create consistency for your mix, whether it's coming from consistency between music and speech. I think that's very critical if you don't have access to other tools for processing.
Okay.
So worst case scenario, if they were in a situation where they were sharing that mix between a front of house setup and a broadcast, if they had the opportunity to run that maybe through an outboard compressor or limiter, is a really basic function. If they couldn't truly split the mix, might help kind of level set that broadcast mix and still give them flexibility to mix, as you say, mix to the audience, mix to the house.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, if you have access to those tools that you can process as an outboard gear and send that to the live broadcast, that would be ideal.
Okay. Another very specific technical question. Can you share some tips on how to improve the sound of drums on a live stream? They sound great in the room, but they're a little flat on the stream. And for some context, the drums are mic'd properly and sit behind a drum enclosure.
Choosing the right mic, I think, is critical. Like throughout the years, the good faithful mic, the Shure NC57, I know how it sounds and I know how faithful it's going to be. Sometimes it doesn't require a lot of processing because it sounds great. But yes, of course, EQing, compressing, and if you have access to outboard gear or plugins, I will use that definitely. But having a good tuning drum, a good tuned drums, like good source, that helps a lot.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't use, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sometimes I don't use gates because, the tones, they just sound great.
In an ideal world. All right.
Yes.
Would love some recommendations for FX on a broadcast mix versus a front of house mix, reverb, etc., to make the sound not so raw and jarring.
Yes, I blend my effects with crowd mics. My goal is to marry them because let's say they stop singing and they're speaking and then all the effects are gone. So my approach is to blend the crowds with effects and the mix. That's more like a natural feel for me. At least that's my approach.
Okay. Do you use LUFSs as your primary volume monitoring, and are there also restrictions you have to deal with?
Yes, I do with Waves, the Waves live meter. We use that as a reference, and depending on the broadcast level, yes.
Okay. How does your master bus for broadcast look like?
My master bus for broadcast, I have, can I just throw names of the plugins?
Go ahead.
Sure.
NLS bus to give that tonality. I have used some of the Abbey Road plugins for EQing, SSL compressor, the limiter, the L1, and that's where I have my scope, as a reference, so I can see my my whole scope of the frequency response on my mix.
Okay. We
Cool.
still. Oh, go ahead. What were you gonna say, Michael?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. We still have quite a few questions, so unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of them today. But I would like just to say to everybody that's attending this, if your question doesn't get answered, or you have another question, or a question across any audio topic, you can go to shure.com/contact. Once again, that's shure.com/contact. And at that page, you can open up a ticket with our application support team. We have a fantastic group of people that can answer so many questions. They can guide you to resources on both our website and other places. There are so much learning on both our site and everywhere else that can kind of really get into the nitty gritty of some of these questions. So shure.com/contact, and then also, shure.com/webinars to link through to our other training opportunities. So I know we're pretty much out of time, but I just kind of wanted to end with sort of one last question for you, D-Fab. Could you please tell us about a time when you were having a challenge during a live broadcast service, and how did you deal with it? How did you resolve it?
One challenge that I would like to share, it was one of the Passion Conference, and we were having issues with one of the RF mics for one of the artists, but everything is planned in advance. I mean, there's backup for the backup and the backup. So we were having issues, and it was showtime. The band was already on the stage. The artist, she was ready to grab her mic, and it was a full-on communication. Everybody on radio. All right, we're gonna give her the second mic, and for us, we have to be ready. Just by patching that channel, it was just a matter of a push of a button. We changed the patching. The mic was ready to go, and she just walked up to the stage. And no, seamless. Like everything was seamless. No issues at all. So having a good team that can do that is a good. It's great.
Makes everything easier, doesn't it?
Yes.
All righty. Thank you so much, D-Fab, for attending and sharing all of your fabulous insights. We just are so happy that you are with us today. Thanks, Michael, for guiding this discussion. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining. I hope you learned a little something. I know I always do. And we hope to see you on the next webinar. Have a fantastic day, everybody.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.